Welcome to the Strength for the Day podcast, which is a daily Bible study with Dennis Fountain. We hope this time together will be challenging, sharpening, uplifting, encouraging, and strengthening to your Christian walk. Thank you for joining us, and we pray you are helped through today's study. Well, good morning. Welcome to Strength for the Day, and I hope that this podcast finds you doing well today. I am wearing like my Hawaiian outfit because I'm trying to bring on the sunny weather. Our weather lately has just been so it's been bipolar, right? We get teased with a couple of really nice days, and so then 2 days later it's cloudy and rainy, and then a day of sunshine and then a day of rain. And so I feel like we're living back on the west side again, for those of you that ever were on the west side of Washington. But anyway, I am looking forward to our study this morning. We have been with Jesus as he's actually calling out the religious elite, the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin, and those who have really defiled what it means to follow God. And we pick up today in verse number 16 of Matthew chapter number 23. Jesus is just a few days away from going to the cross, and we have today and tomorrow's episode, and then we're going to take a short break for all of next week's episodes. And myself, as well as one of our assistant pastors here, Michael Petrick, we are going to walk through the crucifixion week and what that week would have looked like. And so this passage would actually fall in place into that week where Jesus is about to go to be crucified. But before that, man, he calls out the sin of the religious elite. And we pick up in verse number 16 of Matthew 23. Jesus says, "Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by all things on it. He who swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it." He says blind guides. This is a perfect description of these religious elite, one that would have probably brought a smile to the people that were listening. They would have perhaps snickered at this. But here's the truth that we need to see. Jesus used this statement before. The Pharisees were called blind guides because they were blind to the true values of life. Their priorities were confused. One author wrote it this way: they would take an oath and use some sacred object to substantiate that oath. For instance, the gold in the temple or the gift on the altar. But they would not swear by the temple itself or the altar. It was the temple that sanctified the gold and the altar that sanctified the gift. Here's the principle. They were leaving God out of their priorities. And Jesus knew that these Pharisees, they wanted the gold and the gifts on the altar. That's why the Pharisees would practice what was called Corban. Anything that was dedicated to the Lord could not be used for others, but would be used for the religious elite. So they were encouraging the people, when you make a commitment and give to the Lord. If you make a commitment, don't just make a commitment and say, well, God, I'm going to do this. No, you need to give something. You need to have something that backs that up. And the only reason they did that is because they were greedy. They were looking out for themselves. They worked a religious system that brought them the permission to rob God by robbing people, and then still maintain their reputation because it was all under the disguise of religiosity. But I love this simple truth. They were excluding God from all of their teaching. They were excluding the true heart of God from how they led people. And that's why one of the reasons Jesus would call them blind guides. What were they blind to? Well, they were blind to the heart of the Lord. I'm reminded of something that if you were at our church, I preached about this last Sunday, that we talked briefly about Saul and Samuel, and how Saul was making a sacrifice to the Lord when he should not have been. And Samuel spoke those famous words to him, to obey is better than sacrifice. In that passage, Saul is wanting to get close to God his way. But Samuel said, no, you're doing it all wrong. You should have obeyed. Instead of having this heart of sacrifice, you should have had a heart of obedience. How does that connect with these religious elite in this passage? What they were trying to do is they were trying to tell people, well, you need to give and you need to sacrifice. But they weren't telling people this because they were trying to help people get close to God. They were taking advantage of people. They were using their religion and religiosity to take advantage of God's people. How does that connect with you and with me today? How does that connect with maybe common Christianity in the day and age in which we live? I think there's a handful of ways, but one of them is that oftentimes Christians can take advantage of other believers. And what we don't understand is we're doing that, and we're just as guilty as the Pharisees were. How could we take advantage of other believers? Well, I think there are times when a Christian can take advantage of another believer's forgiveness, and so they keep hurting them. They keep talking bad about them. They keep gossiping. I think there are times that we can hurt other believers because of the lack of kindness and the lack of grace that we can afford people. And we have this mindset of, well, it's just who I am. And in those instances, what are we doing? Well, we, like the Pharisees, we're taking advantage of somebody. We are leaving God out of the situation. I think another way that we can do this, like the Pharisees were, they were leaving God out of the priority of the making commitments. So in the passage, they were saying, if you make a commitment, you need to make sure that you're bringing gold to show that you're seriously behind it. And they were leaving God completely out of it. It was not about, we want to help you get closer to God. It was, I want to help me get further ahead. You know, when we look at our relationships, we should not look at relationships as a step to get what we want. We should look at relationships as an opportunity to help God and people connect. I should desire to help God connect with those around me. I should have a desire to not take advantage of people, but instead help encourage people closer to the Lord. Well, let's continue, or else we're going to be on this for a long time. Verse number 23 says this, "Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrite, for you pay tithe, mint, and anise, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. Those you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel." The idea here is that the Pharisees, they were majoring on minors. What does that mean? They were making little small things. Well, you've got to make sure you tithe, and they would do it down to the 10th, and yet they were not embracing these areas of forgiveness and of mercy. And Jesus said, "You have left out the weightier matters of justice, mercy, and faith." So what were they doing? Well, they had rules for every minute of life. But at the same time, they forgot about the important things. They were not showing people grace. They were not showing people mercy. They were not showing people forgiveness. They were not demonstrating a heart of love for the Lord. And so Jesus calls them out on this. And we need to understand, as a follower of Jesus, it is good to pay attention to details. In my life, in your life, we should desire to pay attention to the details of our fellowship of the Lord. But those details are not God in and of themselves. Many Christians make philosophy and philosophical decisions. They make those those doctrinal decisions. And can I encourage you, don't fall into that. Do not gauge or assess where you are at spiritually by how religious you appear to be in the sight of others. I know a lot of people that they say, well, I'm super spiritual because I don't go to the movie theater, or I don't do this, or I don't wear that. That doesn't mean you're spiritual. That doesn't mean you're spiritual at all. I know a lot of godly people that go to a movie theater. I know a lot of godly people that don't go to a movie theater. I know a lot of godly people that wear certain things. I know a lot of godly people that don't wear those certain things. You see, it is the heart that matters. And so through all of this, and I know we're being repetitious, but we need to get it, because I think all too often many Christians fall into the same trap that the Pharisees fell into. Many Christians make their relationship with the Lord about the outward exterior appearance of religion, and we miss the heart of following God from the heart of loving God from within, the heart of allowing God to work within. And yes, we should have things in our life that may be different from the culture around us, but it starts at the heart. So today, I just want to ask you a question. When you look at your life and you look at your heart with God, would the Lord come and accuse you of having just an outward appearance, but a heart that's distant? May God help us today to have a heart that's close to Him. Hope that encouraged you. We'll see you tomorrow as we wrap up this section. We'll try to go from verse 25 down to verse number 33. We'll see you then.